What's going on, everybody? Vince Goodrum here. It is still Tuesday evening. I'll put this video up here for tomorrow. And I felt I needed to make one more video because I was feeling good. And, I got a lot of questions come in about my gaming history and everything like that. And I still needed to cover some unanswered questions as far as to Richard's response originally to my Kaboom video. So I'll make this quick, but I'm just going to give you guys a warning. This is going to be a very boring, a very nerdy computer-like video. It's not going to be a bodybuilding video. It's not going to be a piss video or anything like that. So if you don't want to hear about some nerd stuff here, I would suggest you watch one of my videos on Big Lenny or somebody else I'm insulting. So let's begin. Richard, Banjo-Kazooie came out in 1996. I just got out of the military and I was still working, actually. And Metal Slug came out in 97, the very first one. Now, the truth of the matter is I've beaten every Metal Slug game except for X, but I don't consider it beating it there. To me, it was quite easy, I never got into Banjo and Kazooie because I didn't own the, I think it came out for the GameCube or Super NES there. I had an Atari Jaguar, which I'll explain why I had that in just a minute. But those games came out after I had pretty much got out of most of video games for the most part. The last system I did own was an Atari Jaguar. But the reason why I never owned a Super NES or a GameCube or anything like that is simply because I had a computer. Now, one thing you have to understand, Richard, and like I said, we're about 15 years apart from each other in age, and that makes also a big difference. You see, after I turned 13, I found that games were just way too easy there, When it came to Street Fighter, I would just put a quarter in at the arcade and I tell people to come on, and I might lose after beating like 30 or 40 people. I would just line them up and just cut them down. I mean, my fighting game skills are just phenomenal. Maybe one day I'll play a game of Tekken or Street Fighter with you, or even some of the newer ones there. I mean, that was just my thing. I'm really good at fighting games there, That's one talent. But my whole thing is that after I turned 13 and I was playing all these games, I realized I wasn't really learning anything from these games, I mean, so what? I get 1,000 points doing this here. I beat the game, but I didn't really feel as though I accomplished anything. Not only that, the games are just a little too easy for me, Kaboom is one of the games I considered as very hard because, Oh, and by the way, if you want to know my score is, I mean, we didn't really count scores because it's relevant, because your score is going to be exactly the same. I think it was around 200 and some thousand points here after 30 minutes, maybe 200. But, that's why we did time contest between my friends there, because the Mad Bomber's going to throw all the same bombs. So after I turned 13 and I realized that, number one, these games weren't too hard, but the biggest thing was that I wasn't really accomplishing anything. I didn't feel as though I was really doing anything, I wanted to have more complex games, and I wanted to also multitask and do other things. So I got a computer. Now, having a computer may not sound much in this day and age, especially when you were growing up, but having a computer back in 91 and 92, it was a rarity. I grew up in Beaverview apartments. I was the only one that actually had a functioning computer. Now, the computer I bought originally was from the Atari Computer Studio at Westgate Mall back in the early 90s. At the time I was working at, and I got the computer when I was 15, yeah. whenever I got my first job at Wendy's. Then I worked at Taco Bell about a year later and spent 4 years there. I went into Atari Computer Studio, and I was looking around, and this was at the time I wanted to get a computer. And I saw a couple of ones at the flea markets and stuff, TRS 80s and everything like that, but they didn't really have much here. I wanted a full-fledged computer that I can really do some stuff on, you know, programming and stuff like that. So I walked into Atari Computer Studio. There was a salesman. He was a complete dick to me and told me that I wasn't serious. And then the owner of the place told him to shut the hell up. His name's Sheldon Winnick. He was an architect. You know, it doubled as an architect location and an Atari computer outlet there. You can get all your Atari products there. Very rare and very unique. There's even still some commercials on YouTube advertising the computers itself, and it says Computer Studio. That's where I went. So I asked Sheldon, I'm like, look, I really want a computer, you know. I want to actually learn and do some things. I want to do more than just play video games. So Sheldon made a deal with me. He had an Atari 1040 ST-F. He said that I can come there and pay a little bit every single week until it was paid off. I remember how much I paid. I paid $199 for the Atari 1040 ST. Mind you, this is a 6-year-old device here. So it took me like 2 months to save up, and you got to remember, working back in the early 90s there, you know, the amount of money I made per hour was $4.25. That was minimum wage and stuff like that. So it took me a while to save up. I bought the computer, and then it required a monitor. I didn't want a TV. I wanted a monitor. So I had the computer at first, and sometimes I would just turn it on just to hear it hum, but I couldn't see anything because I ain't had no monitor. So it took me another month and a half. I bought the monitor. It was like $150. So for $350, I had a full-fledged computer, and it had a whopping 1 megabyte of RAM, which, you know, that may not sound much these days, but you know, that's still a pretty significant computer at that particular time. No hard drive, of course, but you know, considering I had 1 megabyte of RAM, I had a whole bunch of floppy disks, you know, just swap them out there. You know, you can keep all your information. It's amazing what you can do with 1 megabyte of RAM. That's actually a lot of space here, more space than you think itself there. Now, one thing about computers in the 80s and 90s, because there was no internet or anything, computers are somewhat like TV sets there. You kept them for many years, you know. People were using VIC-20s for like 20 years, never upgraded or anything like that. I never upgraded my Atari 1040 ST as long as I had it there. So, number one, the benefit of that is I was able to finally play sophisticated and complicated games there, you know, games that require true strategy. Now, as far as RPGs are concerned, I know you mentioned The Legend of Zelda. I never got into that. I played Phantasy Star instead. I think it was for the NES. That was an RPG game. But most of my games I played there was one very good game I played. It was called Epic. You know, you could probably look that up on you can look that up on YouTube as well. It was basically a cheap carbon copy of Star Wars there. But it was an awesome game. It was a flight simulator, required strategy. I also played other games like Police. I always liked the Daryl Gates Police Quest series there, where you have to learn police techniques and stuff like that. You know, that actually helped me later on doing security in my little stint in law enforcement and everything. I played Police Quest 1, In Search of the Death Angel, and played Police Quest 2, Revenge of the Death Angel. I also had Test Drive 2, The Duel, you know, and I had flight simulator games and stuff like that. That's the stuff I really like. I like flight simulator. I like flying around. I like really doing things. And I also played music with it. One of the benefits of an Atari ST is it had a MIDI port. So I hooked up a keyboard, made a little bit of music and stuff like that. I was able to do things. But Here's the thing. At that time, I also wanted a computer to learn programming. So I learned BASIC, and I actually programmed in Pascal at one time as well. I actually wrote two computer programs, Candoria, and I wrote one I called Calc. The Candoria program allowed me, and it was something I used later on, it was to calculate out rate of taxes and stuff like that. And basically, I use my computer, when you're in the hood and everything like that, everyone's got to make their money. And one of the biggest things that I made money with is doing people's tax returns here. My mom did it too. She did it. My mom was good at doing taxes. She did them by hand. I used my computer. I got $10 a pop for every tax application. If you can imagine the projects, there's hundreds of people there. I was coming up with cash, and that allowed me to pay for my all my software and everything like that. Because Lord knows, working at Taco Bell and Wendy's, making $4.25 an hour, that's not really much there. So the software that I actually had, other than tax software, and tax software was basic. I had personal finance for the Atari ST, so I can manage my checkbooks and everything. I couldn't afford Calamus. Calamus was like $300 or Page Stream. So I got Atari Works instead. It was a combination of, spreadsheet, a paint program, and a word processor. Had that, was able to do all my school reports and everything. Use the spreadsheet to do some inventory and stuff like that. One of the things that, we did back in the hood is sold Avon products, so it came in handy. Also bought a Epson action printer, 9-pin dot matrix printer. I was able to print out, and a dot matrix printer is, very loud, but very worth it there. And I was able to print out flyers and stuff like that. So I had a full complement of regular Office software, and I still had excellent gaming there. One of the best games, I didn't play Mario Brothers. I played Zool instead. The Ninja from the Nth Dimension there. Great game, great graphics and everything. And because this is a 16-bit computer, at that time there was, 8-bit. The SNES wasn't out yet. Or I believe it was out. If it was out, it was very expensive at the time. I couldn't afford it. And I already had my computer. So the reason why I really didn't play too much gaming is because I had a computer. So it was either me investing in my computer or investing in my game system. And I invested in my computer. And one of the bigger things that I really want to do is I wanted to get on the World Wide Web. So, I paid for a subscription to Arena BBS, $30 a month there. And of course, I was tying up the phone lines. You see, back in the day, and I had a 2400 bond modem. Back in the day, there was no Wi-Fi or anything like that. You dialed in on the telephone. So after taking up my mom's phone and everything, and she kept yelling at me, I had to pay for an extra line. I think it was like $20 a month. So I was paying $30 for Arena BBS to handle all my online stuff. I was playing Trade Wars and was using the Lynx web browser. The Lynx is a very early version of web. There was no images or anything like that. That's the way it was back in the early 90s. I mean, before it came out with Mosaic, that was the first graphical web browser. But even with that being said, there wasn't really much to surf at the time, maybe a few dozen websites here. Most of the stuff that was accessed was bulletin board systems, where you would dial into it. So so it gets kind of expensive, when you're paying for an extra line, you're paying for service, and $30 may not sound much now, but $30 back in 1990, 1991 is quite expensive there, people. I'm just keeping it real, telling it like it is. So I was paying for all that, and, it was important for me to work as well as conduct my other businesses to pay for my computer. And what I actually used in order to dial online, I used a program called Flash. And whenever you got on the internet back in the day, you had to program the windsock and everything. You had to dial in coordinates and stuff like that. And then you were able to finally dial in. Sometimes the bulletin board systems were so old, I had to convert it over to either 300 baud or 1200 baud. And modems back there, mine was solid, was metal. It was a big old box and everything like that. At one time, I was fortunate that I didn't have to get one of those ones where you put the telephone on it and just squish it in there. I managed to get a good deal. Sheldon sold me a Cardinal 2400 baud modem. I think I only paid $40 for it. Sheldon was a good guy there. He really helped me out. I wouldn't be running websites. I wouldn't have made so much money off online services and stuff if it wasn't for Sheldon. I'll just be dead serious with you guys here. So, and that's the difference between computers now and computers when Richard and everybody else is growing up there, because 15 years makes a big difference here. Computers were a generational item that you didn't buy one every year. You didn't upgrade it or anything. You kept it for years here. It was it's like a TV set. I've had my TV set for like 9 years now. It's something that you kept, and you got a big giant thick book with all the programming and stuff in there. You didn't, most computers come with a little thin set. When it came to computers back in the late 80s and early 90s, you had all your stuff. You had every possible scenario. You were even taught how to solder, and if you decide to upgrade it, you can. I didn't upgrade it there because there was no need to. I didn't need a hard drive. I had floppies. I had like 50 floppies there. I can hold as much information as possible. So I didn't really need floppies. I mean, I really didn't need a hard drive whatsoever. And hard drives were quite expensive. They were like $400 or $500. You might get like a 40 meg hard drive, So that leads me to telling you about the Jaguar. Now, the Jaguar, I got the Jaguar actually in '96, actually, to be honest with you. And yes, Banjo-Kazooie and Metal Slug was out, but I didn't actually pay for the Jaguar. I actually traded in my 1040 ST because I went ahead and got a Mega ST, which had a whopping 2 megs of RAM on it, no hard drive. So I had my Mega ST and I had the Atari Jaguar. I traded it in. I think I paid him Sheldon like $50, and boom, I had an Atari Jaguar, And I only kept that for a year, and because I thought it was a sound investment, do the math and everything like that. But I was wrong. The licensing just didn't work out. I think there was only like 50 games available for it, and Richard is right that the games did suck. I liked Tempest 2000. I had Iron Soldier, and I played the Alien vs. Predator. Those are really the only 3 good games up there. Everything else was just garbage. It was just plain doo-doo. So yeah, I made a mistake buying an Atari Jaguar. If in hindsight, I would have probably bought something else. I probably would have bought the SNES there. But I don't know what I did with that. I think I may have given it back to the Atari Computer Studio and just got a couple of other pieces of software. I think that's what I did. You have to remember this is like almost 20 years ago, Well, not 20 years ago quite exactly, but close to it, But that was the thing about computers. Having a computer back in the early 90s, and I'm not talking about the real cheap ones. I'm talking about a real legitimate computer back in late 80s, early 90s. That was a big freaking deal, basically. You're talking about a time before the World Wide Web. You're talking about times before Wi-Fi. You're talking about devices that were very uncommonly used. Very few people had computers back then. I mean, there was a big rush on it back in the 80s and that's what partially led to the crash of 82, to where these really cheap computers, you couldn't really do nothing on them. They had very little memory, like 64 kilobytes of memory. So you couldn't really do anything on it other than maybe some typing, and you can play video games on them there, you know. I wanted a legitimate computer where I can do all the tasks and then some. So that's the answer to the question. That's why I never got too much into games. I just needed things more. I needed more complex games. I wanted flight simulators. I wanted real strategy games where you end up learning something from the games. I wanted educational games. I wanted office software. I wanted to get on the web. Most importantly, I wanted to program. You know, I wanted to learn. I learned BASIC. I learned Pascal, and I started into Risk Code because I wanted to build some real games. But I think that pretty much ended there. And once I got to creating websites here, and also one other thing, the way at the time you use HTML coding in order to create a website. So you know that little notepad thing that you see on most computers? That's what I use in order to build my websites. I used a freaking notepad. Later on, I used a program called Arachnophilia. And then finally, after I got my first actual IBM computer, because at that time, Atari, after the Atari Falcon, Atari was just coming to a close, so I wasn't able. So at that time, after Atari closed shop, after the failure of the Jaguar, I finally decided to purchase a IBM 486 DX computer. Not the SX, the DX. The SX was a piece of crap. The DX was a whole lot better. That's when I didn't really buy too many games with that. I think the only game I bought was really Duke Nukem 3D, and I just still kept all my Office software. I got Mosaic at first, which I kept all for about maybe a week before I got Internet Explorer, the very first original one, or maybe it was Netscape Navigator. No, yes, it was Netscape Navigator I actually had. So, but that's a condensed version of things. So Richard and everybody else, the reason why I had a Jaguar is because I didn't pay for one. The reason why I didn't go play Zelda or most of these other games is because I had a computer. You know, I felt that a computer was a lot better investment back then for me. And I'm very glad that I got a computer instead of an SNES or anything like that. Because if I hadn't got that computer, I wouldn't have learned computer programming. I wouldn't have been able to build my websites and stuff like that. And who knows, I might be working at Popeye's Chicken or so forth, you know, and I wouldn't have much money. And also I learned how to type as well, which is very important with most jobs these days. But again, that's a condensed version of the story. Hope I didn't bore everybody out. It's a long video. But, you know, wanted to just give you a proper explanation of things. So there's a lot more stuff I can go into, but if I did that, you know, I'd be talking for like an hour or so forth. So hopefully that answers your questions. But that's all I got to say today, people. Take care.